because here you have the microphone.
I'm not used to sitting. Buenos dias. And from now on, I will translate simultaneously into English. So, the previous speakers talked a lot about tourism and business, and now I'm no longer Bartolomeo, I'm somebody else, so thank you. You know, I learned a new word when I came to Spain. It's called mismo, which means the same. But today I'm going to talk about the opposite of mismo, and you can tell me what that is in Spanish. It's about change. Think about something that you've wanted to change in your lives, whether it be your hair, your diet, I need to change my diet, your job, your relationships, your spirituality, whatever it is that you want to change. What led you to make that decision? How do you make decisions about change, particularly in a time when people have experienced many shocks in their lives, whether it be climate change, COVID, political upheaval, you name it, we've lived through it. How do you make that decision? Is it based on qualitative factors? Well, I think it feels right. Or is it based on quantitative factors? Well, it adds up to the right number. Well, we're going to talk about that today. So one of the things that we are doing at Sonoma State is pioneering wine business education. We started 26 years ago. We celebrated our 25th anniversary. We started with undergraduate students, then master's students, then executive students. And one of the things that I think that a university can perform is the education of the future leaders of your businesses. And that's why business schools exist, to educate the future leaders of businesses. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about those societal shocks that I mentioned, climate change, COVID, so forth. I'm going to raise some research questions based on some research we did with a number of wine businesses. Talk about styles of leadership and how they might lead to preservation of tradition or innovation, because that's what business schools talk about. Should we stay the same, or should we innovate and change? Should we follow the path that always worked, or should we evolve so we won't perish? I'm going to explain some of the methods that were used for those of you who are researchers, because I think it's important for researchers to look at methods. And then finally, I'll talk about the findings and propositions for future research. I'm hoping to engage Dr. Falco and some of his colleagues, and Dr. Fuentes, who's going to follow me in researching these questions in Spain. So there's a whole host of changes going on in the wine industry. People like me who are baby boomers are getting old. We want to get out of the business. We want to retire. We want rest. So there's going to be a transfer from our generation to something, possibly to the next generation. I was at a winery actually in Saint-Saturny last week, and they've been in business for 26 generations. And the current generation is the 5th generation to engage in production. There are 5 people in the business, all own 20%, equal share. So how do they decide what to do with their business when they have to pass it on to their children? Life-threatening events, disasters, drought, weapons, deglobalization, pandemic disease, those are all impacting the decisions that wine businesses need to make, and they all impact whether or not you're going to have tourists. There are also theories about how organizations, and we're in a business school after all, there are theories about how organizations adapt or don't adapt. But those theories seem to be pretty inadequate in the context of the wine industry. So we're going to look at the research on resilience and ask ourselves the question, how do you become a resilient organization? What leadership style do you need? And what leadership style should we be teaching our students so they can be effective leaders for their businesses and for their children's businesses down in the future? Well, in the United States, we've had a tremendous dislocation in the wine industry, and according to my friend Walt Klenz, who used to be the CEO of Beringer Blass Wine Estates, it's going to be a tough uphill road for fine wine to reach back to pre-pandemic levels. Wine sales volume in the United States did go up, but very small amount, about 3.8% in 2021. That's last year. I don't have 2022 data yet because we're still in September. And of course, my colleague at Sonoma State, Liz Tosh, said that very little progress has been made by the United States wine industry and probably globally to entice customers from Generation Z and from the millennial customer bases, as well as multicultural customers, people who don't look like me, to enter the wine category. So there are a lot of factors making it difficult for wine businesses. So do we need to rethink our business model? That's the question number one. We always start with questions. Do we need to rethink, reset, reprioritize? And number two, should we be innovative or should we follow tradition? Because no one knows the answers to those questions, and no one has raised those questions. Yes, they've raised questions about sustainability, but they haven't raised questions of how is it that wineries can sustain themselves over 26 generations of family members. Nobody's addressed that question. Well, the thing is, you have to actually want to change. And in order to change, you either have a transactional leader who builds resources, builds consensus, creates a culture of excellence, enhances employee or people motivation, gets people to work, either through carrots or sticks, through positive or negative reinforcement. And finally, who is focused on the bottom line. Let's increase our profitability. Let's increase our productivity. And it doesn't matter whether there are not enough glass bottles to fill our wines into. It doesn't matter whether there are not enough trucks. It doesn't matter whether or not the price of electricity is rising and making it more expensive to operate our business. We're just going to be focused on the bottom line, on profits, profit after tax and cash flow. And I'm sure you teach finance here in this university, and cash flow is very important. Then you have the transformational visionary leader who is courageous, who is a change agent, who believes in people, says, well, I'm going to sort of provide a broad direction and let the people figure out how to get there. We're always going to engage in continuous lifelong learning, and we're able to handle complexity, ambiguity, and uncertainty because we know where we're going and we have a vision of that future. Well, so that leads to a set of propositions. And obviously you want to have a good blend between the transactional leader, the leader who is focused on the bottom line, and the visionary transformational leader, the leader who is focused on the future. Proposition 2, of course, says that there might be some issues with companies led only by visionaries, by gurus or mystics who focus on the vision of the future, but they don't have the resources and capabilities to get the business to that future. Then you have Proposition 3, that you have the business leader who is focused on leading themselves, leading their people, and leading their business and assembling the resources to do so, but not really thinking about the future, and is unprepared for crises and shocks. And then proposition 4 is businesses that have leaders that are neither transactional nor transformational are not likely to succeed or even make any change towards a new strategy. So this is an example of how not to do a PowerPoint slide. I always tell my students, no eye charts, you know, your eyes probably go around. But this is to show that we first started by looking at 20 published case studies about wine businesses and did content analysis of those cases. And those were cases that were published in peer-reviewed journals. And we looked at how various dimensions or variables and searched for key words that talked about how the leader led themselves, led their people, and led their business. Then we pivoted towards looking at the option to actually talk to people, because the only way you can answer questions is to ask them. I mean, an unasked question is an unanswered question. So we put together 3 focus groups in October and November of 2021, last year. We timed it so it would be after the harvest, but before the Christmas holiday, New Year holiday selling season. And this is important if you're doing research in the wine industry. Never try to contact a wine industry leader during harvest, because even though they're not actually out there picking the grapes themselves, they're always too busy. And never ask a wine business leader to talk to them during the holidays, because they're busy trying to sell products and great volumes of products and make up the end of the year report. So we talked to 3 panels of 8 leaders, about 24 in total, and these are the range of people that we talked to in these groups, and they were from all over the United States. And we'd love to do this again in Spain and the rest of the world. And, you know, they came up with some pretty interesting answers, some pretty standard answers. They said that a wine leader should create a vision, place value on diversity, know what, when, and how to speak. I think the communications person left, but I know that's something that communications professionals are interested in, is what, when, and how to speak. You know your industry, know your customers, you know, take ambiguity and distill it into simple, doable actions. Have emotional intelligence, you know what the other have empathy for the other person, soft skills, resource, and of course, know how to understand the numbers, because if you can't read an income statement or a balance sheet, you're in big trouble as a leader. So we looked at these 3 dimensions: leading the business, leading oneself, and leading people. And these were the skills. And I'm not going to read them to you. And again, this is an example of how not to do a good PowerPoint slide, but to give you a sense of the variety of importance of the characteristics. And this is what we should be teaching our students about, you know, in terms of how do they lead themselves, how they lead their business, and how they lead people. And give them exercises in doing these things. So it all boils down to a model, and of course business schools are very notorious for creating what we call these 2x2 matrices. I don't know if you use 2x2 matrices in your classes, but I always use 2x2 matrices. And on one side you have, on the left-hand side, you have the transactional leaders. And are they prepared, and do they have the resources available? And yes, no, maybe, someday. And then the transformational leaders across the bottom axis has the organization empowered employees to run towards the vision of the organization and what it wants to become in the future. And you have these 4 quadrants. And these 4 quadrants are loosely tied to what Dr. Falco refers to as the resource-based view of strategy. So I've borrowed heavily from his work and Jay Barney's work on the resource-based view of strategy to think about, well, those organizations that are run by leaders that are neither transformational nor transactional are at a deficiency. they're at a disadvantage. Those organizations that are led exclusively by transactional leaders that have their eye only on the bottom line but no vision of the future, well, maybe they're losing out on some opportunities they could otherwise take advantage of. Now, those organizations that are led by visionaries, and yes, we want to feel good, we want our employees to be happy, we want our customers always to be happy, and but we're not going to give them any resources to make that possible. Well, they're stuck, they're rigid, they can't move, they can't change. So the sweet spot, and the sweet spot is, I had to explain this to the owner of the producer in Saint-Saturny, a Corpenade producer named Lopar. I'd explain it to her. I said, well, I asked her, do you ever play tennis? I don't know if you play tennis, but if you've ever played tennis, there's a part on the racket where if you hit the ball just on that part, it goes in the direction you want it to go. It has the amount of spin you want it to have. It has the speed you want it to have. That's called the sweet spot. And the sweet spot means that you have a leadership capability that is a core competence of your organization. Your leadership can be seen as a valued, rare, hard to copy, and sustainable resource of your organization. But we don't know which companies fit in those boxes yet. We're still trying to find out. Maybe you can help. So, future directions. You know, can wine businesses make changes in the long run? Can you make the change? Can you go on that diet? Can you change your hair? Can you change that relationship? Can you, if you're a tourist, are you going to change your itinerary, change your plan and go somewhere else? And, well, I like Alicante, but, I really want to go to León because there's some great people who live in León that I need to see. And will the next generation of business leaders follow both, either none of the transformational or transactional strategies? We don't know yet. We're still trying to find out. But sustainability is more than the triple bottom line. It's more than planet, profit, and people. It has to do with having an organization that will stand the test of time. So, some conclusions for practice. And we talked about this with Jessie Lopar last week. I asked her, have you made a plan for succession in advance? She says, no, we got to start thinking about that. Have we thought about how much time it's going to take to make that plan? No. Well, think about 2 to 3 years, 24 to 36 months to create a plan. And make the diversity, equality, and inclusivity of your organization part of the plan. Give people a chance to have their voices heard. Start with an organization chart. Find out where the holes are in your organization chart and fill those with the people who are going to help you advance your plan. And finally, I call it learn up, go back to school. Come and talk to us professors. Don't be afraid to sit in classes and learn something. And that's why we created programs for MBA students and executives specifically in the wine industry. I hope that will happen here at the University of Alicante. I hope this is the beginning. And as Rick says at the end of the movie Casablanca, I don't know if you've seen the movie Casablanca, but he turns to the policeman and says, Louis, I hope this is the beginning of a beautiful friendship. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Armand.